This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
So this is the Troutbitten podcast. Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantowski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten, a fly fishing guide, and the author of Troutbitten.com, which is a vast resource for trout anglers on a fly rod. The website is now over 750 articles deep, with tips and tactics, stories and commentary about fly fishing for wild trout in wild places. And among that content, across the hundreds of articles that I've written, is the inherent understanding that we're out there to catch trout. That's what brings us to the water. But how many do we catch? And really, how many should we catch? What are the expectations? And how can we know that we're fishing well? In some way, maybe none of this matters, right? I mean, it's not really about the numbers, it's about the experience. Sure it is. And we all certainly agree with that for the most part. But as I've written, there are two sides to every fisherman. One that just wants to go fishing and is happy to be out there, and another that desperately wants to understand the techniques to solve the ever-present mystery of how to catch more trout. And Troutbitten aims to address both of these sides. In truth, it's the tactical side that keeps us coming back. Most long-term anglers go fishing to learn something and to improve a skill. And as we learn and refine our craft, we enjoy everything that the woods and the water give to us. The endless discovery is the joy of trout fishing. We're thankful that it's different every day, and we know we'll never learn or experience all of it. So if the goal is to improve and study and refine, then the numbers in the net do matter, because it's the trout that ultimately decide if the drift is any good. The trout tell us if we've solved that daily mystery. A fish at the end of the line is confirmation that our decisions and efforts are good ones. So I think everyone goes through a fish counting phase at some point. I used to carry a clicker, and sometimes I go back to counting for a day or two, or for weeks at a time. I almost always count at night because in part, that data matters a great deal to me. And I'll argue that counting is a way to gauge our success, not just against how well we did last time out, but how well we're doing compared to what is possible. I mean, what's the bar, right? What's the ceiling? How many trout could be caught if I had everything just right? The best fly and the perfect drift. I think every fisherman asks those questions. How am I doing relative to what is really possible? And that is what we'd like to spend time talking about tonight. But before we get to the topic at hand, let me introduce my friends with our Q&A round. Josh Darling, owner of Wilds Media. Here's your question. Now that the colder weather is setting in, does getting out early really matter? Or is late fall and winter fishing better in the afternoon?
I think getting out early matters less, but I think it still matters. You know, obviously, we've talked about this a little bit before, but in the summer, you want to get out early because that's when you got the coolest water, and that's not as much of a factor right now. But it's still time on the water, and if you can be out earlier than later, then you're giving those first daylight opportunities to eat to the fish that you wouldn't be giving if you weren't there.
Right on. It all changes pretty quickly, right? Like you said, in the summer, if you didn't get out at dawn, I mean, you weren't going to get much trout fishing in, but that pattern changes really quickly.
Yeah.
Anybody else? You think, let's say deep winter, does getting out early, really early matter to you guys in the deep
think
winter?
If it's going to be a sunny day, I'd rather fish before the sun comes up, no matter the
Good point.
The temperature of the day.
So, I'm with that too. But I think common wisdom is, hey, wait till the sun comes out and that water will warm up, and then, the trout are going to become more active.
Yeah. And I've seen probably better later afternoon days in the winter time than I have early mornings in the winter, but I'm not sure how. I can't really recall how the sunlight's played into that.
I think a very important thing though is the water type that you're fishing. I mean, we fish a lot of limestone streams, spring-fed streams, and our waters are more consistent, so that warming of the sun doesn't matter all that much. Anyway, so for me, getting out in the morning, I mean, it's just hard to beat it. The earlier I can get out year round, for me, I'm getting out. Hey, Bill Dell, here's your question, bud. When fishing streamers, are you looking for a streamer bite or will you stay with those streamers no matter what?
Most days I'll kind of test to see if they're on streamers. If they're on streamers, I'll fish it. If they're not, I'll switch. Where it becomes difficult, sometimes they'll be interested in a streamer. It's kind of like a fool's gold, where you think, oh, maybe they'll really start to commit, but you end up spending the first 3 hours a day thinking they're going to start to eat them really good soon, but they don't.
Hey, tell us what you mean by interested, though. What do you mean by interested?
So when I say interested, I mean they'll follow it. They'll kind of swipe at it.
Yeah.
If they're truly eating streamers, you won't miss as many fish for the most part. If you're doing like, I can usually tell if I'm doing things right as far as keeping the line tight, setting the hook, and I'm missing fish. At a point in time, it becomes the fish's fault and not mine after so many failed attempts.
Bill, do you ever find that they're eating nymphs and streamers just as good as one another? Or is it usually one or the other for you?
Most times I think it's one or the other. I've had days where it's like a little bit in between. I feel like sometimes in the fall time of year, I may catch a lot of fish, but I might not see the bigger fish until I throw streamers.
That's cool too. Hey, so Austin Dando, here's your question, bud.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I know you have a wood products degree from Penn State, and you can talk about something that I've always wondered, maybe. How long does it take a submerged log to decompose in a river? Let's say it's all the way under the river, 2 feet on the bottom.
Oh, good specifications, because that doesn't matter.
I thought so.
So in order for a log to decompose or decay underwater, there's 2 things that are required.
Okay.
Any rot or decomposition of wood in general requires oxygen, air, and water or moisture. If you remove one of the 2 variables, that decay does not happen, or it does not happen at a very rapid rate. So if we have a log, let's say the log is 1 foot in diameter, underwater that's 2 feet, you now remove the oxygen for the most part. So what that does is the log gets saturated. It pushes out all the oxygen that's in the log cells, does not allow any space for fungi to grow on it or any sort of marine insects to eat it. And that log could last for decades. Now, if you take a tree trunk and you drop it down to the bottom of a lake of 100 feet down, it could last for centuries.
No way.
That's why, like in Michigan and some of these really deep waters, they're mining for wood out of the bottom of reservoirs and really deep rivers, because these old trees, these old growth forest trees that got cut down and dropped off the logging rig 100 years ago are untouched, and you can't get them otherwise. You pull them out of the water, you cut them open, you dry them out, and they're as good as the day they fell in.
So does that mean that a partially submerged log in a river is gonna decompose significantly faster? Will the submerged part of a partially submerged log decompose?
Not so much. It'd just be more the transition place where it goes from out of the water to into the water, where it's exposed but drying out and exposed and drying out again, to where the fact that it's being saturated continually and never allowed to either remove oxygen totally or remove moisture totally, and then rot and decay and other types of growth happens. I'm
going to believe Austin because it sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same thing. Like, have you ever put a fence post down in the ground real deep?
Yeah.
Versus the ones you put in only 1 foot deep? There's a lot more moisture there. There's a lot more air available there, and those fence posts will rot a lot faster than ones that are 2 or 3 feet down, because you're removing those things.
My dad talks about getting everything down past the frost line. What's the frost line?
2 feet.
It's very important.
I don't know.
Is it 2 feet?
That depends on region, right?
Yeah, that's what Grandpa told me.
Yeah. So what made me think about that question is I told a client this last week, I said, oh man, that log's been here since I've been here. We were fishing some structure, some wood near the bank. And I said, that log's been there forever. I've been here for 25 years and it's been there. He said, oh, come on. And I got to thinking about it and I'm like, no, it has. I mean, that's that log. It's not a rock, it's a log, and it's been there all of that time.
Yeah. Yeah. If nothing washes it away, it'll outlive all of us.
No way. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's almost as permanent as a rock then. Well, in terms of our lifetime.
Sure.
All right. Trevor Smith, Dr. Smith, here's your question.
Okay.
What is your routine at the end of the trip? Say you've caught the last trout or you made your last cast and you're a half mile away from the truck. Your platinum cowboy.
Yeah,
truck.
there we go.
What do you do next?
It's a good question. So a lot of that depends upon where I'm fishing, I think. Yeah, most of the places that we fish around here require some traversing through the woods. And because of that, I'll typically break down my rod, reel in any excess line, and just kind of bungee cord my rod together and head back towards the car. I guess I change that up at nighttime just because the process of getting out of the water and finding my way back to the car are a little bit different. Turning the headlamp on is kind of my first step of saying I'm done, and doesn't apply in the daytime. But I think typically right now I'm trying to fish almost up to the last second that I can, because I always have some time constraints with the family. So
sure.
That involves a lot of haphazard both entrance and exits from the water. Hence why I show up in my waders and I leave sometimes.
Right. We've gone over that.
I have all these
puts us waders on it.
Yeah, I had this this dog that used to pee in the house a lot, so I had all these dog mats, those like disposable dog mats, and that dog died, and so I've got all these extra disposable dog mats, and so I just keep them in my truck and throw them down on the seat, and a lot of times I'll ride home with my waders on, just so I can get credit for getting home on time.
Extra credit.
At least I can.
I'm home before I said I'd be.
Right. And the kids can gather around while I take my waders off. I'm cool with that.
Oh yeah, right.
These moments matter.
No, that's a strategy. Yeah. That's right. That's a
These
strategy.
moments matter.
It's a tactic.
I'm home.
It's a tactic. Yeah.
Yep.
I always have water bottles in my car too. I'm not great about carrying water out on the stream, but I've always got some water bottles in my truck too. So I always drink a couple of bottles of water on my way home too.
I've started doing what Austin does on that.
What's Austin do?
The life straw.
Ooh,
The Trout Mojo.
That's right. The
Mojo.
Mojo.
Tell us, Austin.
Not the water bottle, the filter. So
Right.
It's just like a
Straw.
9-inch plastic tube that's got a filter built into it. And you just grab it when you're thirsty and you drink up that creek water. And I call it the River Mojo.
nice.
Brings you all the good stuff.
I had a life
All the
straw for a
minerals.
while and I never used it. And then I saw you using it on the river. I'm like, oh, that is lighter weight. And I tasted it one day. I'm like,
It
yeah,
is.
it doesn't taste bad at all.
So that's
It's fun.
Yeah, that's my question. I understand that, once it goes through the filtration, it's safe to drink, but how does it taste?
Most of our rivers, it tastes good.
Yeah, I feel like our creeks are pretty tasty.
Doc, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Dr. Smith, what do you think?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
He's okay
I'm cool with
it?
life straw.
You have to-
Doctor approved.
That's right. It's doctor approved.
Absolutely.
All right. Great stuff. Let's take a short break and we'll come right back to have everyone tell us some lies about how many trout they catch. Whether you're on the water or at the fly tying bench, AvidMax has you covered. AvidMax.com offers an impressive scope of premium brands and products to help you achieve your ultimate goal, success on the water. Their catalog of over 19,000 products includes everything a fly angler or fly tyer desires. With fast shipping and expert knowledge, you get the gear you need when you need it. Listeners of the Troutbitten podcast receive a discount when shopping at avidmax.com with the coupon code Troutbitten10, no spaces. Enter the code at checkout to get 10% off your first order. From high mountain streams to the salt flats, AvidMax has the gear and expertise to elevate your game. Fulling Mill is the world's leading producer of flies, fly boxes, hooks, beads, and tippet. Known for their barbless hooks, they have many of your favorite trout patterns tied barbless. Not only that, they feature patterns from anglers like George Daniel, Pat Weiss, Josh Miller, Joe Goodspeed, and many others from around the world. Every pattern is backed by the 200% Fulling Mill guarantee. If a fly isn't up to the highest standards that you expect, they will replace it with two that are. Stock up at fullingmill.com or ask for their flies at your local dealer. I think one of the most unspoken topics is how many trout you really do catch. Unless somebody thinks they've done exceptionally well, they rarely throw numbers around. And basically, fishermen are out there every day thinking they probably could have caught more trout. So I'd like to put down some concrete numbers here. Let's share what our expectations are for a good day on the water. Let's talk numbers of fish. But this is not about bragging, and it's not about shaming Bill because he can't catch as many fish at the same rate as the rest of us. So give Bill a break. No, really, we'll talk numbers. We'll talk specifics.
We pick on somebody else every time.
That's right.
Yeah, it's not just me.
Equal opportunity. We'll talk too about how this is all very conditional because there are so many variables that affect what's really possible on the water day to day. So let me kind of set the table for this discussion with a quick story. As a newish fly fisherman in my late teens and early 20s, I struggled. Everyone does. But eventually I got to a place where I thought I was doing pretty well. And when I started focusing on my nymphing game, the trout really started coming to hand more often. Good nymphing skills allowed me to catch trout in almost any conditions at almost any time of day in every season. And really, I thought I was getting pretty good at it. But I didn't have fly fishing friends back then. I fished solo almost always, or perhaps with my dad or my uncle. But other than that, I had no reference, no gauge for what should be possible. I read a lot of magazines and books, but again, numbers to the net just weren't mentioned very much. So the owner of the fly shop I visited at the time was kind of the pinnacle of angling to me. I assumed that he caught just as many trout as the next guy and probably a lot more. And he was a great guy. In one conversation, and I'll always remember this, I just flat out asked him how many trout he caught in a day of fishing, say 8 hours. And I remember he said, "Oh, Dom, if I reach double digits, I always feel like I'm doing pretty well." And that was it. All of a sudden, that was my reference. That was my gauge. And at the time, I was fishing almost every day and working at night. And in those days of fishing, I usually broke double digits. I probably averaged 10 or 12 trout in a day of fishing back then. So I thought, damn, I guess I'm doing pretty well. And in truth, I let myself be kind of satisfied with that catch rate. And then, about a year later, I met some guys who introduced some refinements to the nymphing system I was already using. Really, it was the beginning of what I now call the monorig, tightline nymphing system that includes a sighter and keeps the sag and drag of traditional fly line out of the mix. And with those changes to the rig and a little better understanding of how to know where the nymphs were, my catch rate doubled, and then it tripled. All of a sudden, I was catching trout at a pace that I previously thought was impossible. I learned a lot of this in the winter, and I distinctly remember the day when I caught 30 fish in about 4 hours of fishing in the snow on one of our wild trout streams. It was a moment for me, and I texted my friend Steve and told him this unbelievable news. It was crazy to me that a rig and a little bit of knowledge made such a change in my effectiveness on the water. And honestly, I've been looking for that next breakthrough ever since. So I was going to have each of you guys give your numbers first, and then I'd just add 10 to whatever you guys said, right? but no, really, those are my numbers. In a day of trout fishing on our waters of, say, 8 hours, if I catch 30 to 50 fish, I feel like I've done really well. Now, I know some people listening are going to hear that and say, wow, this guy's a liar. And then others are going to hear me and think, man, is that all that he catches? But that's my truth. And we'll also get into how to really stack the odds in your favor and catch more trout. We'll also ask you if any of that even matters. But to start, what are your numbers, guys? Sure, we'll get into all the variables too. But let's just say that conditions are really good and your goal is to catch the most trout in a day. How many do you catch on your favorite water in about 8 hours?
Dom, I'll say pretty similar to you. 30 to 50 trout is always a good day.
Yeah.
There's those rare occasions where you go over that number, and that doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does. But if everything is prime and the conditions are just so, I'm probably right in that sweet spot too. Cool. Nothing crazy.
Well, then I feel okay.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know.
I think for me, 20 fish has always been kind of a benchmark. There's things that affect that in terms of time of year, conditions, et cetera, which we'll talk about later. But if I can get to 20 fish, and a lot of times for me, it is rare for me to get full days out still. So a lot of times I'm multiplying my morning by 2, which isn't always fair, because the morning bite certainly can be better at certain times of year around here. But for me, I think I probably am still at a stage in my fishing, or maybe I'm at a stage in my fishing where, despite the fact that I think the numbers can help tell a story, I have so many variables that play into my time on the water. And even when I'm on the water, if I have a kid with me, I have a backpack on with a kid hanging out the back.
Oh, yeah.
And so
that's a different thing.
Well, it is a little bit. And I think it's led to me de-emphasizing numbers for the time being and being a little bit more scrutinizing about each one I do catch and how I caught it and what that particular drift was like. So that's me.
That's a great, that's fantastic. I'm glad you brought that up because, again, we're not throwing numbers around, to say anything except really to provide that frame of reference for maybe what is possible. And I'm sure there's more possible than, what the numbers I'm given. But I guess for so many years, I always wondered, well, how many can I really catch? And then that story I told about the guy in the fly shop, maybe I could have been catching 2 or 3 times that.
Yeah.
And yeah, knowing what's possible. You said another thing too about how they'll be more active in the morning.
Sure.
And I think we all acknowledge that you catch trout in patches,
Yeah.
not just trout.
Yep.
All fishing is like that. You catch nothing for 20 minutes or half hour, and then all of a sudden, bang, 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 you catch 3, 4, 5 fish in a row.
Yep. Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I can say confidently, probably 31 to 51 is probably.
The price is right, Josh.
Hey now.
No.
I
You
love
guys have really covered what I would probably say. I'm gonna be really happy if I catch 30 fish. I'm gonna be really happy if I catch 50. I'm gonna be pretty dang happy if I catch 20. And under that, I'm probably gonna wonder for 8 hours what happened. What could I have done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill?
This year I started keeping track. So when I first started fishing, I wrote an access database and created like a front end to it. And
Is that a spreadsheet?
no, an access database is like an actual database, and I built a front end for it. And I was
I'm lost. It's
Yeah.
okay.
it's dorkiness. And so basically it
Fish
allowed me to
counting
keep track
website.
of it was a fish counting application that I had on my computer to record what I caught it on, because when I first started out, I wanted to keep track of all that stuff because I thought by trending that, I thought it would help me catch more fish. This year, I actually went back, created the Excel file, and I actually started carrying a clicker because I was curious, like, hey, how many fish do I average? And so this year, I feel like my numbers are down because I've explored a lot more water that unknown.
Yeah.
And so
100 plus streams by now, right?
Yeah. And so
Different streams, yeah.
And so a lot of those, you may get to a stream and you spend 3 hours driving around to find a spot that's not posted. But
Sure.
my official count, I'm averaging 19 fish per fishing outing this year.
But okay.
That's impressive.
That brings me to, it is, especially because you're exploring water like
Those are high
that.
numbers.
Yeah.
That brings me though to this. I mean, so catch rate is important. How many trout you caught in a trip isn't necessarily a good gauge, right?
Right.
Because we're talking about a catch rate. So let's say per hour, right? Catch rate per hour is a good gauge, but trout per trip is not. I don't know how long your trip was. So have you figured it out per hour? I'm pretty sure that your database.
I haven't done
did.
hours yet. I haven't put the hours. I thought.
What's the matter?
Yeah, I know. Maybe next year.
You need another.
What's the matter?
So I've thought about, for the next year, I've thought about, do I record hours and do I record like how much I walked and how many miles I covered? Because I think it would be cool to record how many miles you fished in a year, like walking
Right
on
on.
a river.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. You could probably do that with the
pedometers.
I used to do that. I had one of those Garmin watches, and I'd track my river miles in the day. I never recorded them, just like to look back and see what it added up to.
Yeah.
What'd you get up to? Average it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't even remember anymore.
I feel like I'm like 8 to 10 miles a day.
Are you serious, Bill? That's a lot,
Bill covers water.
I was going to guess maybe 2.
right?
But that-
of walking in,
that's
walking
insane,
out.
Yeah.
Bill.
Well, I'm fishing a lot of new water. So when I
Right.
fish new water, I like to cover it and see. I don't want to go fish a new stream and fish 2 holes in it. I want to see a lot of water.
Out of all that water, how much of it do you think you're fishing?
Depends on the size of the stream, but probably half of it.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of cherry picking
But
Yeah.
new streams I usually cherry pick
for sure.
just to see what's in them, and then is this worth coming back to?
Which this kind of what you're talking about now reminds me of your article today, Dom, on Troutbitten about just how much of the time that you're fishing is your fly in the water. It goes back to that, false casting, and the way that you choose to fish a particular stream has an impact on that, even that catch rate per hour, right? If you choose to cherry pick as you go, while you may have, if you were starting and stopping your watch every single time you began fishing, that's one thing. But if you start and stop your watch at the beginning and end of the day, your catch rate per hour might look a lot different, right?
Oh, for sure.
So I don't know. It's just interesting. There's just nuance upon nuance with this.
There certainly is. So for me, catch rate, when I talk about per hour, I guess in our discussion tonight even too, I'm saying just, from the time I leave the truck to the time I get back to the truck, if it's 8 hours. So if you catch 50 fish in 8 hours, which again, I'm saying is, to me, pretty damn good. What's that? 50 fish in 8 hours is like a fish every 10 minutes. And now if you start thinking, you go, fish every 10 minutes, man, sometimes I catch a lot more than a fish every 10 minutes. Well, sure you do. but they come in patches. And then you got to go to the next spot. And then you hang up in a tree, and we all do that. And then you decide, then there's a guy upstream, so I got to go up above him. And then you got to take a leak. and then you're going to eat a granola bar. And then some dog comes down to the stream and blows up the whole area. That's fishing. That's the way it goes. And you're not constantly with your fly in the water, like you said, Trevor.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I think this type of honesty is good. There's a lot of dishonesty in this subject. And our intent is not to build ourselves up or cut ourselves down when we talk about this. During my college years, I worked at the local fly shop.
Yeah.
And
you're a fly shop jockey, Austin.
That's right. My official title. But there'd be groups of people who'd go out on the stream for 4 hours and come back to the shop and tell me they caught 70 trout. And that the fishing was just okay.
A piece?
About 70
a piece.
Yeah.
In 4 hours.
Individuals. Yeah. They'd go out and they say they come back to the shop. It was okay. I caught about 70. I just don't, you're not telling me the truth.
Well, if somebody do the math on that real quick. What is that? How many is that per hour?
Trevor.
Or how every Trevor.
Dr.
70 in 4 hours.
70 in 4
That's 17 and a half fish.
Yeah.
An hour. 17 and a half an hour.
That's a lot.
So a fish every how many minutes?
What is that, 6 minutes?
What's that, every 3 minutes or something?
Is it 6 minutes?
Less than that.
It's a fish every 3.5 minutes.
There you go.
Dom, you nailed it.
I mean, I was close, right?
So that's out there too.
What do you mean out there?
On
the fringe of what's possible.
I'm not saying that's out there too, as in what's possible. It's out there too that there's a dramatic amount of dishonesty in this side of the sport, and then it leads to false expectations for other anglers and people just feeling bad about their results, and that's not what you want.
Right. That's kind of why we wanted to cover this. Has a lot to do with why we wanted to talk about wild trout versus stock trout and holdover trout, and it's those expectations that I think are so. There's so much information out there. There's so many influences out there that are making us think like, I should be catching this many fish. I should be catching this big of fish. There's a lot of perhaps dishonesty out there leading you astray. Bill?
So here's the question. When you're walking back the trail and another guy comes by you and he says, "Hey, how you do? How many did you catch today?"
Couple bass.
What do you?
Couple bass. That's right.
Yeah.
That's my.
What do you tell
That's
him?
my thing. I say couple bass.
I'm the same way. I'm like, maybe I'm antisocial, but I try to.
Right.
I feel like over the years I've developed an answer that would not lead to more questions. Meaning,
what's your answer?
Like I just say, I caught a couple, and so if I tell them I catch 0, then I've noticed that a lot of times that gets met with a bunch of advice. And if I say
right, let me tell you how to fish.
Yeah,
right.
And so if I say I got about 20 or 30, and then then you get like interrogated, like what were they eating, and so the antisocial me says I got a couple. I try to keep my head down and keep walking.
Yeah. Very neutral answer.
Like Josh said, that's my thing. I say, a couple bass, and people just kind of look, and I just keep walking.
And some people will know immediately. Like, no,
right?
No.
I just say that's very valuable information, and I look at them quizzically, and usually if I hold eye contact long enough, it weirds them out.
I don't know you.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not telling you.
Yeah, I usually say it was all right.
It was okay.
Hey, what about this? What we're saying? How many trout we catch? What's a catch? What's a catch, guys? Did I have to put it in the net? Do you touch it? Do you have it close? Do you have it on for 5 seconds? What's a catch?
You just got to see it.
Get out of here.
If it looks at my streamer, I can't. I hit the button.
If it looks
moved a bunch of fish today.
I say if I'm in like if you got it into the like your end move, right, where you're like rod tip up, you're sliding that trout into the net, and it comes off. I still move. Yeah, if I'm in that stage, I think I'll count it.
I always think about the saltwater thing, like you got to touch the leader, but with that 25-foot mono rig, you're always touching the leader. So every one you hook, you caught.
There you go.
Here's what I'd say. I'd say fish in the net is caught, but a fish at the net or a really good encounter with a good fish has a huge impact on how I consider the day went. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
And so, if I'm counting how many I caught, then yeah, fish in the net. But if I'm trying to get a gauge on how the day was and was I doing something that was working, it's really more about fish on.
It is, because you fooled a trout.
That's right.
I mean, that's really what we're out there to do. And if you, rushed a smaller fish to the net and he popped off, really kind of who cares?
Absolutely.
And in that case, I feel like if I could have got him in the net, then I'll count. Right, Austin? What am I going to say? Austin, go ahead.
If I really wanted to, I could have caught more,
I could have caught more today. If I really wanted to.
That's a good point, though, because sometimes that is the case.
That kind of leads me to this. Sometimes the goal isn't to catch the most trout.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about like, out there, I'm catching trout. I'm catching trout. How many do you catch? Oh, well, I caught this many. I know that none of us here are really doing that. That's not really our goal all the time, or even half the time. So I could have caught a bunch more if I really wanted to, but I was just working on this tactic. And that sounds funny for us to say, but quite honestly, it's true. Bill, you said you had people offering you advice sometimes. And I actually had a guy come up and he saw that I wasn't catching trout, but he was banging trout down there. And I had my dog with me over on the left side. And he came up and my dog wanted to cross the river. And I'm like, yeah, stop. I just didn't want the guy approaching me, but he approached me so that he could tell me what they were eating and how I could catch them. They were eating olive emergers down there. And he wanted me to know that he caught about 15 trout and he missed just as many.
Classic.
And I'm like, well, thanks. Hey, thanks. But honest to God, I mean, I saw that there were risers up there, but that's not what I was doing. I was kind of testing a different leader formula. I know that the goal isn't always to catch the most trout, right?
Yeah, it isn't.
How about this? How often or how many times a year do you guys catch no trout? When do we get skunked?
5. I'm going to say 5. And I fish,
Okay.
I'm going to say I fish 100 plus days a year.
I think I probably, I think it's probably a couple, but I fish probably half the days that Dom does.
So same rate, basically.
I think so.
Right. It just happens.
So. Yeah.
Yep.
I've been skunked twice this year, and one of them, so usually it's like, I went out and fished for a couple hours, because a lot of times if I'm getting skunked, I'm going to go find a stream and catch a dumb fish.
Just so you don't get skunked.
Just don't go home.
You got skunked on my birthday, Bill.
Let's bring that up again.
I got skunked on Trevor's birthday. I don't know if he put some sort of hex on me, but that was probably the longest I've fished. I think we fished 9-10 hours that day. Maybe it felt like that because I didn't catch a fish.
The fish were there.
They were.
I should have come down and told you what they were biting on.
I know.
Right.
Would have been nice.
Just wanted you to know, buddy.
Yeah.
I think I'm similar in that if I don't catch something during the day, it's either a really short trip, or it's something I'm experimenting with or trying to work on. I think what Josh and Dom said there is pretty much in line with what I experienced.
I would add to that weather as a variable too, because I think I think back to the last day I was skunked, and
good point.
It was winter, blizzard, and water was coming up. I just never got ahead of the conditions and did the right thing in time. It was like the weather was ahead of me. And even the conditions were getting to me.
That muddy water, it's just not fair.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't count in muddy water.
And I'd say that's when I get skunked the most, is in those really poor conditions.
Sure.
And I don't mean weather conditions as much as water conditions.
Yep.
And muddy. I don't care what anybody says. It's when the water's muddy, you're kind of, at some point when it's muddy enough, you're just hoping something's going to happen. Yeah, you can do supposedly the right things and hit the banks and this and that. Bigger flies, move water, be patient. Okay. You're hoping at some point, not fishing.
If I drive by a stream and I plan to fish it, if it's high and muddy, like we always say, coffee with 2 creams.
Yeah.
If it's that muddy, I'll drive and find water.
Right.
Where
that isn't coffee with 2 creams.
Yep.
Yep.
Even if we get a couple inches of rain, there's always a couple streams that you can find. If you drive around long enough and over a few mountain ridges and keep driving to the headwaters, you'll find something that's somewhat fishable if you want to fish that day.
Does that time factor into your catch rate?
It does. Yeah. That if you're driving 3 hours, that's where it ends up. You're not catching big numbers that day. You're putting on big miles on the car.
Kills that average.
Yeah. What you're saying, Trevor, though, I think is perhaps the most important thing to consider, really. The conditions change our expectations. It's the weather and the river conditions and even what's in the river. We kind of acknowledge the chocolate milk, and we acknowledge that sometimes the guys will talk about fronts moving in and out and how almost all fish like a stable front. But let's talk about what's in the river too. When I go north of here and I go brook trout fishing, like high mountain streams, it's not always just brook trout, but it's wild trout fishing up in the mountains. And I kind of grew up, we did a lot of camping trips up that way. I love revisiting some of those streams just for what it reminds me of. Some of them don't have a lot of wild trout, but honestly, most of them do. And I tend, especially these days, to go back to the ones that do, because I like trying to just rack up those numbers. I love it. It's not a technical type of fishing. Honestly, I'll tie on a royal wolf, and if they don't eat it in that pocket, I'm up to the next pocket and up to the next pocket. And Bill talked about covering 8 miles in a day. I don't know about that many, but I'll cover a lot of water on those streams just because I know that if the trout are there, they'll eat that presentation of a royal wolf, fairly dead drifted, you know. And I love that kind of fishing. And I kind of expect to catch 50 fish in a day, maybe that 40 to 50 fish in a day. And I've had some really good days that are above that, perhaps by far. And I'm not counting. Yeah, I kind of used to, but it's not the goal. But the point is, yeah, that's a different kind of fishing that what we all do sort of day to day around here in our limestone, selective trout, wild brown trout streams.
So why are those streams, what factor do you think makes you catch more fish there? What's the most?
Yeah, it's because they're infertile streams. I think that those, I'm talking about north of here, freestone streams, there's not nearly as much bug life. And that's fair to say. Besides the bug life, they also don't have the year-round feeding that we have here. Wherever it could be a tailwater too, wherever you have trout that are going to feed year-round, 12 months out of the year, they feed regularly, then they are not all that excited to take your flies. But if you go somewhere where the feeding season is short, then, and you go in that, prime feeding season, then it can often be fish after fish after fish. They are more eager to eat your flies. Add in, Bill, that, brook trout, wild brook trout are just more eager. They're just a more eager fish than brown trout. And yeah, I think those are the biggest differences.
We've had this debate, I think. I think it's the pressure that those mountain streams don't see as much pressure, so they're not as educated.
That's certainly a factor too, yeah.
It's probably a little bit of both.
The other thing is consider that the streams that we most frequent have thousands of wild trout per river mile.
Yeah.
Which is not common. Most other anglers for trout don't have the amount of trout density that we have here in central PA. So that reminds me of living down south in North Carolina. I fished a lot of North Carolina streams, Southern Virginia streams, where there might be like 200 wild trout per mile. Yeah. And if you're catching more than a dozen of them in a day, you're doing something really special. So that's a good point. That's something that is really important to think about.
Yeah, for sure. All of those conditions. Yeah.
I like to consider dumb fish per mile, because if you're fishing a river, that's
a new gauge.
It is
dumb fish per mile.
If you're fishing a river with 500 dumb fish per mile versus 2,000 educated fish per mile, you're going to catch more fish on the dumb side of the scale.
You might.
We don't catch the dumb ones, Bill. Just you.
That's I'm cool. I'll catch dumb fish all day. I'm good with that.
I'll take the dumb ones too. That's good. That's good. Hey, what's the most trout you've ever caught in a day? We're talking about, what we consider to be average, or not average, but good. We've thrown those numbers out. What's the most you've ever caught in a day? Have you counted, and what's the most? Trout, not panfish, not bluegill, Austin.
Hey, no.
This year, the highest number I've got was 82.
That's a lot of fish. Are we talking wild fish?
Yeah, wild fish from a very popular river in the central PA. My best all time, I think, is 122.
Ooh, that's up there.
That's crazy.
I caught 110 one time. We were on, I'll say it. I was on the Castleman River, and my buddy Steve and I, they stalked the heck out of the Castleman. It's an infertile stream. They stock it with cookie cutter rainbows. We used to camp there with my dad. Enjoyed the camping trip, but the fishing kind of got almost boring because you could literally hang like an egg pattern in the current and they would eat it. Just hang it, not even drift it. And so they're very eager to eat. They're hungry. So Steve and I started counting, and we said that we were going to try to get to 100 fish. Really, that's when I realized how hard it is to catch 100 fish in a day.
Yeah.
I started actually counting and fishing long, hard days covering water. But again, you'd snag up. You'd lose your fly. You would have to go around other people. and all the things I said earlier, the act of fishing takes some time. So the act of catching, you might be able to catch it almost, every 2 or 3 drifts, you might be able to catch a fish. But all the other things that go along with fishing made it very difficult for us to get to 100. It was fun. It was chasing. We used to say the Castleman doesn't count. What happens on the Castleman doesn't count. But it was fun. And that's what made it fun, really, was counting and trying to be that efficient that you could catch that many.
Do you think there's a sweet spot in the number of hours you fish a day? After X number of hours, do you feel like you start to lose focus?
No, I don't think the hours changes my focus. I think the fishing action changes my focus. So if I'm 3 hours into the day and I'm still pretty fresh, but the fishing's super slow, my focus might be kind of waning. But if I'm 9 hours into the day and the fishing's hot, I'm going to be all in.
Ooh, that's a good answer.
Yeah. And gosh, I'll take that to night fishing. I know Josh and I have experienced this at night, where those hours, like 1 hour at nighttime with no action, when you have almost zero visibility, is like 4 hours of fishless time in the daytime. And so,
because of the focus.
Yeah, just the focus. And as much as you may fight it, and you can reflect on nights where you've caught no fish for 2 hours and then caught the best fish that you've caught all season, you still just struggle so much to keep hope that that next drift is going to be the one. And because of that, you find your presentations break down, how close you're getting to the bank, every single aspect of that presentation that needs to be maybe good and exact to catch a fish starts to break down. And so your likelihood of catching a fish breaks down. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you said, Bill, you lose that focus, right?
Yeah. And so you lose your numbers, or I feel like for me, like that 6 to 7 hours of actual fishing.
Sure.
After that, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting older, my body starts to wear out, but I feel like if I'm on the water dusk to dawn and then the next day I try to fish, I feel like I burn myself out a little bit. And so if I fish that 6 to 7 hours, it leaves a little bit of hunger. And so I'm, more excited to get out the next day.
Tom, to answer your original question about how many is the most, I might be the worst counter there is out there. I am not a numbers guy. But if the fishing is really good, particularly in one day, some days I decide to count. But I'd say probably mid 80s is the highest I've gone.
Yeah.
I don't think I've hit 100, but again, I don't really count.
You count tomorrow. Start by counting tomorrow. Let me know when you get to 100, man.
Okay.
So let me bring this up. John Garrick titled one of his books, All Fishermen Are Liars. That's probably a true statement. But there's a special set of people out there who can't seem to stop themselves from exaggerating their catch rate. And sometimes they do this to the point of absurdity. I think we all know people like that. So let's talk about it. There's a local guy who's infamous for broadcasting his catch rate to anyone who will listen. He says he keeps a record of every trout that he catches, of dates, times, etc. And his average catch rate for the year, the average, is a trout every 2 minutes. And that's just ridiculous.
That is a
and
lot.
I'd argue that it's not even physically possible. To do the math, that's 240 fish in 8 hours.
Yep.
Every day you go out. That's the average.
Nope.
Come on. 240 fish in 8 hours.
Lines must be drawn.
Well, right. I'm saying there are liars. There are liars. And really, let's not let that influence, what we think are fair expectations, right? To me, that's the whole point of this conversation.
I think, so I golf occasionally, 3 or 4 times a year. And this same person exists in golf who continually estimates a score underneath what they actually shoot. And you might ask the question, who are you hurting by lying about this, right? And
yeah, go ahead.
I think there's multiple layers to that answer. But I think primarily, from each individual standpoint, you're hurting yourself when you are not honest about how many fish you're catching and what your score is in golf, because both are they should be sports of integrity and sportsmanship. And you're really only ever outside of true formal competition, which I have my feelings about, but you should only be competing against yourself and what your goals are for your development as an angler, right?
Sure.
And to add this layer of feeling like you need to be hitting a particular bar in order to be a successful fisherman, to be a successful golfer, whatever it may be, you're going to be tempted to either fish in a particular way that you may not otherwise fish, or call a fish that wasn't a fish, or it just, I think that it's a slippery slope when you begin to add those things into the equation. And I think the heart of fishing, and the heart certainly of what we're all trying to do, is to refine our tactics and refine the way that we fish to a point that we feel like we are doing justice to the water we're fishing. We're being integrous about the way that we're counting fish, the way that we're treating those fish, the conditions we're fishing in, who we're fishing with. And I don't know, there's so many aspects to this. And I think while, Austin, you said earlier that sometimes the days that you count fish sort of present themselves to you. And I like that, because that's true. I feel like that's been my experience as well. So occasionally, the day just says to you, today you will count fish because the fish will be so plentiful. And that's awesome. But in general, I just feel like this is a delicate thing to handle, because, gosh, can you think of many people that talk a ton about the numbers that don't have the wrong idea about fishing?
Oh, I love that. You continue, you keep bringing us back. You keep grounding us, right? And I think that's so important.
That's the good thing about having a friend group, kind of how we are with one another, where none of us feels a need to lie or to exaggerate. It's kind of the fun part about having close fishing friends, is you can be as honest as you
Absolutely.
can. And we're going to be excited to hear whatever you did, and figure out why you didn't catch more fish,
and then make fun of you either way.
Yeah,
sure. It's all in good fun.
Right. Some of our best conversations about fishing have been after days where we've all struggled, or where 3 out of 4 of us have struggled, right? And we can go back to the drawing board and talk about what it was that worked and why, and take that into the next trip out.
Yeah, we didn't start with this podcast topic, episode 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, because it's not the most important thing, not by any means. And I think we're trying to make that clear here as we go too. I don't think, besides Bill, who's seriously on a bit of a different mission right now, putting some stats down on paper this year, the rest of us aren't really counting fish on a day-to-day basis. I'm not. I can tell you that I was out for about 3 hours this morning, and I'd say I maybe caught 15 fish. And I thought that wasn't too bad, especially because I fished streamers for about half of it. Yeah. And then I fished with nymphs because they really wouldn't commit to my streamers, as we were talking about earlier.
That's good.
Yeah.
And that wasn't bad. I was feeling pretty good about that, But again, I don't have a precise count. Now, I used to kind of do that. Like I said, I think everybody kind of goes through that phase, and then you come back into it. Then you want to do it again. Whatever it takes to motivate you to get out there for the next trip or for the next season, those are all cool things. And if you're, like you said, Trevor, not competing against other people, but not even competing with yourself, but just trying to improve.
Yeah.
And I know we all are. And that's really our goal, in addition to just wanting to be out there all the time, trying to continue to make sure it's part of our life to be out there.
Absolutely.
And we'll go through those highs and lows. Like this weekend, we had pretty high water. I went out and fished my butt off the whole day, and I landed one fish.
Yeah.
And I hooked up with a couple others. But there's other days where you catch as many that you can't believe what you're doing, and you think, man, I'm the greatest. But then no, I'm really not.
Humble pie will come next week.
So
exactly. Highs and lows. It keeps you in it.
And lots of trout, wild trout waters. That's the good thing. They will humble you. As soon as you think you got, I got it. No, go ahead back out tomorrow.
That's right.
So I archery hunt, and Josh and I and Austin all kind of hunt in tandem. But as I archery hunt, a typical range for a bow archery hunting in Pennsylvania is probably a maximum of about 35 to 40 yards. That's where most men would probably reasonably say that's the furthest you should shoot. So historically, I've shot my bow at 20, 30, and 40 yards. And this year, for the very first time, I began to shoot at 50 and 60 yards just because the sight I was using had pins that sort of matched up with those yardages. And as I began to shoot at 50 and 60 yards, what I found was that for the very first time, my shooting at 20 and 30 yards started to become almost effortless. And those are yardages, even at 30 yards, we'll pick 30. 30 is the yardage at which I traditionally would kind of struggle. And yet this year, kind of pushing those limits a little bit and experiencing the difficulty of shooting at 50 and 60 yards made me refine aspects of my technique that I had not been forced to refine earlier because they were not magnified at 30 yards. But at 40 and 50 and 60, I was able to see very clearly the errors that I was making and how they were impacting my ability to hit the target, and particularly within a range. So my question, and the long story analogy is, do you guys feel like fishing conditions or fishing waters or particular rivers or with a particular fly or style that is not necessarily the most successful, but is a valid option, I suppose. If learning to catch fish under those conditions or learning to catch fish on this particular X river or Y river in your fishing careers has been a tool to take back to other waters that are potentially a little bit more accessible or have more fish or have easier fish, or if you've ever noticed that the harder days have led to better days ahead because of what you learned on those days.
I think that I don't, at this point in my fishing career or whatever, I like to be kind of uncomfortable or unsure of the results because it's more exciting to me.
That's neat.
Because if I know I can go down to stream X and I can go in here and I can catch 10 fish, it doesn't, excite me as much versus the unknown is the most exciting piece to me about fishing, whether it's around the next bend, whether it's a new condition, whether it's a new tactic. That gets me the most excited. I think it helps you grow the most of an angler if you force yourself to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. I like that.
That's your inspiration, really.
Yeah, that's it.
Is the unknown. Yeah. So that's currently like your inspiration. For me, Trevor, I took large periods of time, sometimes years at a time, or seasons at least, and focused on only one tactic. I once fished streamers for 10 or 11 months. It was 11 months, really. And then the skate has happened and it got me out of it. I fished streamers only for those 11 months. And I really didn't tie on another fly. I just didn't. And I wanted to see what would happen if I only focused on streamers, not just because, the conditions are really good. It's, water's coming up or it's a cloudy day. No, I fished streamers no matter where I was and how the river was. I learned a lot, but I wasn't trying to catch a bunch of trout. And then because of all I learned in those months, and it was a lot, and all the different rivers, I was fishing almost every day at that point, 5 days a week. And everything I learned, I took it over, and I still take a lot of that knowledge over and things I've learned over to wherever I might fish tomorrow.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll cover your question a little bit more broadly and just say that I've absolutely seen that in what you're describing, and more generally in terms of just fishing for our central Pennsylvania wild brown trout out of primarily limestone streams, who and we've discussed this a little bit. We're not going to say they're the most difficult fish to catch, but they're difficult fish to catch, and they're picky fish.
Yep.
And so, so after moving here and fishing for only them for the last 8 years, mostly only them for the last 8 years, the times that I've gotten to go back and visit my, childhood waters they've been mind-bogglingly easy experiences in terms of catching fish.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like walking through your elementary school and all of a sudden you feel really big.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
so
I'm dominant here.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So to tie it in, like it completely changed my expectations for what I should catch when I'm on the river, just fishing here.
Sure. Yeah.
So Dom, you touched on a little bit earlier about fronts. I think that's one of the biggest factors as far as catch rate, like that post front, pre front type thing.
Weather fronts.
Yeah. I don't think trout like those drastic changes in temperature or pressure. Right. They're kind of sensitive to that.
I'm with you on that. I never charted the barometric pressure outside of night fishing. I did that for about a season of night fishing, and I didn't find much correlation. I think there are other bigger factors, especially at night. But no, a lot of guys will tell you, hey, man, as soon as it starts raining, get out there. That's great. But a lot of times with that rain comes the pressure change or whatever it is, the front's changing. And once it kind of settles in and now the water's coming up, I do better. I agree with those people, mostly, who say that a stable front is when trout are most active.
Yeah.
That said, I still think light conditions and river clarity, water clarity conditions are bigger factors.
Yeah. And yeah, on a slow day, I find myself hoping for some kind of change in the conditions.
I know, yeah,
So
right.
if I'm fishing a long day and it's slow, or if I was fishing yesterday and it was really slow, and something has changed overnight in terms of pressure, in terms of conditions, temperature, whatever that is, then I will find myself thinking that'll probably make a difference, because I think that a change in pressure or temperature or conditions generally implements some kind of change in trout. And so if the fishing was super slow yesterday and something drastically changed since then, like a front moved in, then I'm going to naturally assume, and maybe it's just a hopeful nature, but I'm going to assume that it's going to make a difference for the better.
Right. I'll take it. And like you said, hope.
Good point.
Yeah.
It's that rain coming in. I go, oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
let's go. Maybe this will turn them on. If it has been slow all morning.
We've seen that at night too.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
absolutely.
Big time.
Right.
Yeah.
So all of us fish nymphs on a regular basis. I fish nymphs because honestly, I catch more fish on a regular basis on nymphs, year round, season to season. But when I fish streamers, I expect to catch fewer trout. When I fish dries, especially if I'm trying to force feed them on top and I'm not fishing over rising trout, then yeah, I expect to catch fewer fish, right? So you get back to the numbers, and no, I don't expect to end up with just as many trout in the net if I fished streamers all day as if I fished nymphs all day.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Again, conditions and sort of situation dictate some of that. We've all fished nymphs through the hearts of hatches and had equal success to dry flies, and yet there are times where a well-placed dry fly, well-drifted dry fly, is going to equal or outpace a nymph, whether that be because of your ability to present it further across the river, or whatever the conditions may be. So I think
Sure.
if we were all choosing to fish dependent upon how can we catch the most fish per hour on any given occasion, and we had to pick one style, we'd all pick nymphs. I think hands down.
Right, but we don't do that.
We don't.
We don't do that, right?
We don't.
Like you said, for all of us, I think here, the goal rarely is let me go out there and catch as many fish as I can.
Yep.
And I think it's that way for a lot of anglers who've been at it for a long time. Your goals changed.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that when you first start, you're just trying to catch fish, and then you're trying to catch a lot of fish. Yeah, you're trying to catch big fish. We know how that whole thing goes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think a lot of people, it feels good to catch a lot of fish because you know that you're doing a lot of things right. That's that affirmation from the trout that we need.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Something to also recognize, though, is when we go out, we are expecting to catch fish.
Okay.
I knew a guide a few years ago who used to say the biggest downfall of any guided trip is the client expecting to always catch a fish.
Yeah.
And I never knew how much to agree with that, because I thought if I went out there and I had no expectation of, I'm okay with catching nothing, I wasn't going to be trying as hard. I want to go out there, I'm going to expect to catch something. I'm going to expect to have a result. Okay. And if I don't expect that for myself, then my standards are lowered. And I thought maybe that could get into, again, another slippery slope. Are you guys going out always expecting to catch fish at all?
Oh, hell yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Joey's been fishing a lot. He's fishing more days than he's not. And he always says, do you think we'll catch fish today? I'm like, yeah. Basically, that's my message, is we're always expecting to catch fish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Austin. I think that expectation, it ties into the whole concept of hope, and your drifts are different. Your choices are different. Everything's different. Your whole disposition on the stream is different when you feel like catching a fish is possible.
I think confidence and fishing with confidence is a big thing, because if I go out not thinking I'm going to catch a fish that day, if I go an hour without catching a fish, I'm like, well, this is what I expected. I'm just going to leave.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
All right. Thank you, my friends, for another excellent discussion. So I think what we're saying here is that it all depends, right? There are so many variables that affect the reality of what is possible on the water that we can't really put concrete numbers on such a thing. But you get to know your own waters too, and you have the marks of your best days. After a while, you know what is possible where you fish, and then you might meet someone or learn a new tactic that turns your expectations upside down. Once again, numbers of trout are not the end goal, not all the time. Fish counting can be a bit obnoxious, really. especially when someone you're fishing with is counting your trout. Don't count my trout. Competition is best left off the water, in my opinion. And the only reason I count sometimes is to understand what's really possible and to try for better. Because again, it's the drive to improve our craft that brings us back to the river day after day. Hey, thanks again to everyone out there for supporting the Troutbitten podcast. Let us know if you have questions or suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. Austin, will you read us out?
Yep. Remember, Troutbitten.com is a free resource for all anglers, so dig in and check it out. Navigate through the menus and find what you like. Share it, leave a comment. Use the search page if you're looking for something specific. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags, too. Thank you for listening. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment. It really does help. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.